All right, guys, welcome back to our Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here, our 2024 ACC Championship game preview and prediction between SMU and Clemson. Tigers get in via Miami losing on the road to Syracuse, which we both predicted, by the way. That puts the Tigers here in Charlotte, 8 p.m. Eastern time on ABC. 2-point favorites are the Tigers, 53.5 is the total. We'll go ahead and get started with this Clemson offense, Nick. This is a team led by Cade Klubnik, who's been the heart and soul of this football team. It's putting up almost 36 points per game, 29 touchdowns, 5 picks, on top of over 3,000 passing yards, another 7 rushing, and 437 on the ground. He's been a really good runner for them. He's really elevated his play throughout the year. A tough interception there and some bad timing when they were in the red zone against South Carolina to put that game to bed. Looking for the check down, just missed it. It's unfortunate they gave them that loss. But here they are with an opportunity to still be in the playoff. This is a guy who's really had to carry them. You've seen it against Pittsburgh. The offense went stale. He stepped up late. You've seen it throughout the year, though, as well. With this guy's had to, do it a lot. Really with his legs, but with his arm as well. What do you think of Cade Klubnik, Nick? Because this guy has been, somewhat accurate, 64% at times, though this offense does go incredibly stagnant. He's not fully to blame, but I thought he had a great game against South Carolina as an unfortunate ending. That's a real tough defense he played, though, so it gives you confidence he can play well in this game and win the conference title.
I'm high on Cade Klubnik. I think he had a really good year. I think it's an underrated good year that people are not talking about enough. 3,000 yards passing. Sure, 64% comp rate's not phenomenal. 29 passing touchdowns to 5 picks, a 7.2% TD ratio there. I think it's a solid ratio. He's a solid player overall. I think he's had a really good season, excelling at some points. Second highest rusher on the team as well with 92 carries for 437 yards and the 7 scores. So I think he's a really solid player, a great leader for this team. Had a really good moment against Pitt in the dying moments of that game. The loss to South Carolina certainly hurts his stock, in my opinion, but overall, this is a team that can still play their way into a college football playoff as long as they win against SMU in Charlotte. And if they're going to win this game, it's going to be because he has a great day on the ground and through the air. He has to be a really solid player in both aspects. I like what I've seen of him this year, and I think I have no doubt that he can continue to get the job done when pressed upon. He's a really good quarterback, a really solid young athlete who's been good for this Clemson Tigers offense.
And when I made my preview last week before the South Carolina game, I put on the slide, it said that the supporting cast, they're going to have to step up and make some big plays. That's exactly what they did. Antonio Williams, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, Jake Brinkstool, these 4 pass catchers, they all made exceptional plays because it wasn't going to be given to you. There's going to be a lot of tight coverage. Klubnik was able to deliver some nice throws, and they were able to come down with nice receptions, some big plays from the supporting cast. And at the end of the day, they only walked away with 14 points, but they had 400-plus yards against that defense. Again, they got in the red zone twice, and they were unable to come away with points. So this is a team that played, one of its better games in recent memory, Nick, on offense. And it's because these pass catchers were doing the deed. I was very impressed with what they were able to accomplish. It's unfortunate, again, they came up short. But it cannot be forgotten how good these guys were and how much they've grown in this receiving group, including those 2 freshmen.
This is an offense that has a good unit here, a solid, receiving core. They've definitely recruited some solid pieces. More recently, they had not been recruiting talented players at the skill positions down there in Clemson, but they've got some solid pieces here now. Antonio Williams, 788 for him, about 12 yards to grab and 10 scores. Good numbers there. Bryant Wesco has certainly stepped up. He's been a really surprising piece, 17.8 yards to grab, 3 scores. TJ Moore, 4 scores. Brinkstool, the tight end, who's been really solid for this team, 5 scores for him, 438 yards on the season and 10.7 yards to grab. I've been happy with him. Tony Stello has been solid as well. This is a unit that's getting better, a decent wide receiving room. We were hoping they would have a good season. I think Williams certainly exceeded expectations, as did some other pieces there. Wesco particularly, I do like what I've seen out of this offensive receiving core. It's a good unit, and they're playing good football.
Talk about this rushing attack and the offensive line. Phil Moff, almost 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns on the year. It was tough sledding in South Carolina. They were able to stay ahead of the sticks for the most part, and they avoided negative plays for a majority of the game. There was at one point they were driving. They also attempted a trick play. He ended up fumbling. So that's another thing. Clemson just had it right in front of them. They were unable to put it away, Nick. So this offense did show signs of life. Against Pitt, the rushing attack wasn't all that great. And against Georgia back in week 1. Other than that, though, they've typically been able to provide quite adequate balance. This is an SMU team. I think the jury might still be out, potentially, in how they will play, but against the tougher opponents this year, they've done well against the run, and they have a very good, deep defensive line that we'll talk about, that is. The biggest news for them is they got Tristan Lee at back at left tackle and then Marcus Tate at left guard, and they were very good against that, elite defensive front, might be the best in CFB in terms of pass protection, Nick. Ryan Lyncham at center, Nick's having an average season. Walker Parks at right guard. Those are probably going to be your two weak links, and then at right tackle Blake Miller is going to be your standout. What do you think of this offensive line? Because it was a pretty impressive performance again. They did a lot better than I thought they would against South Carolina. I expect them to kind of just get blitzed in the mouth, and they played a very good game. What do you think of this unit coming to this contest against SMU that, again, is very stout on the defensive line if people aren't aware?
Certainly a tough battle for this Clemson offensive line against this great defensive line that SMU has. I like some of the players they have here. Kyler Sadler is a really good left guard. I think he's been having a solid season despite being a youngster. Walker Parks, a graduate senior, is a great veteran at right guard. I like what they have at center. I think the tackles are solid as well. They played some good games. Blake Miller is a really talented right tackle, and they've been able to run the ball effectively at times as well based off this offensive line, creating good holes for Phil Maffa and Cade Klubnik. I think it's been a really solid benefit. This is a good offensive line, but they face a tough battle here. I think SMU can have the edge in this matchup because this is a very physical defensive line here. They got to be strong. Clemson's got to hold up well here.
Now we move to an SMU offense. Rhett Lashley's done a great job with the Mustangs. Certainly the weakest schedule of anyone in the ACC, but if you're not a good football team, you're not going to win these games. And, Kevin Jennings, he got the starting nod after they struggled early on in the year to really figure things out at quarterbacks. Preston Stone was the starter last year. Very good one at that. But I think Rhett Lashley the entire time knew that this guy was a pretty impressive talent that had more upside, and now he's up to over 2,700 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He's got nice mobility as well. He's a good runner. Hasn't really showcased it much as of late. But this is a guy at numerous times throughout the year got 10-plus touches. The last few weeks, they didn't need that, so they tried to keep their QB healthy. But in this contest, you're going to need some QB run against an athletic, powerful D-line in Clemson that they've not seen all year long. Jennings is doing a great job, Nick. Again, though, we haven't really seen him in matchups like this. Again, the most comparable defense will probably be Louisville. Played very good in that game. Other than that, though, it's been pretty smooth sledding here. How will he battle adversity if that comes to the table?
Kevin Jennings has to be strong in this game, and he's been really solid since taking over as the full-time starter for this team. 67% comp rate, 2,700 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 7 picks. A good season. He's a really solid runner as well when he needs to be. He's a very balanced quarterback. He's very accurate, solid in the pocket. I really like what he can do. Has good field vision, good reads. I like Jennings a lot here. This is a tough test, certainly coming up against this Clemson team. But I think Jennings is more than capable of doing so. He's got to play smart, got to play a good game. Cannot turn the ball over at all. Cannot allow Clemson to capitalize on turnovers. Have to be smart, use your legs when you need to. I like what I've seen out of the quarterback for SMU so far this season.
You look at a supporting cast that we thought was probably the deepest in the country, or in the conference at least, one of the more underrated ones nationwide. I remember Preston Stone in the preseason said that he thinks his group's the best in the conference, and everyone laughed at him. We were like, what are they laughing for? These guys are incredibly deep, even without R.J. Maryland and Jake Bailey, who are down for the year. These guys have stepped up. Roderick Daniels Jr. is now the leading pass catcher, 502 yards. Keyshawn Smith, 499 and 5 scores, and then the ultra-speedy Jordan Hudson right behind him with 5 scores and 363. Moochie Dixon's really had to take over as the number 4. And then we'll talk about Brashard Smith at running back, but he's also a phenomenal pass catcher as well. The group's not as deep as it started off the season, Nick, due to some injuries, but there's not great drop-off here. Maybe in a game like this, you would love to have R.J. Maryland out there. Reality is he's not going to, though, but they're not all that concerned.
They're not all that concerned because there's solid pieces here. Daniels, 502, 16.7, and 2 scores for him. Keyshawn Smith, 500 yards receiving, 16.6, and 5 scores. Jordan Hudson's been really solid as well. He has 5 scores in addition to some other catches from him. Cavante Dixon's been really solid as well, 350, 19.5 yards to grab, and 1 score. Brashard Smith is a solid receiver out of the backfield. Matthew Hember has stepped up at tight end in R.J. Maryland's absence. He has 3 receiving touchdowns, 15.4 yards to grab. This is a good unit, a deep unit. I really think this is one of the best in the conference, if not the best, one of the best in the country. A really deep unit that's got some solid pieces, and they're complemented by a really strong running back that we'll talk about in a second here.
Yeah, Brashard Smith, he transferred over from Miami. He was a receiver for the Canes, but they didn't have enough options at receiver. They didn't have any open spots, that is, so they said you can play running back, and that was just the best decision probably anyone's made in terms of position conversion. 1,157 yards, 14 touchdowns. He's an explosive playmaker. He's just played this position very well. And you've seen it early on in the season. They were starting to give him the ball more, and he's really exploded onto the scene. Had 3 straight 100-yard games, followed by 2 60-plus yard rushing games. I think this attack, though, again, Nick has not played the toughest of defenses, and I think his explosion, his talents overall, going to reign supreme if it's a little bit tough up front. The run game's kind of stalled out a little bit against Virginia and Cal. Wasn't all that great. They only have 1 200-yard game since the beginning of October. But they've provided adequate balance. I'm not trying to knock them too hard, but they haven't exactly been overwhelming opponents. And I think against Clemson, they're going to probably have to do that. You want to look to slow them down, wear them out. And I just don't know if SMU will be able to do that.
They're going to have to try and find a way to do that. They have to be successful on the ground and balancing their offense and passing. So far this season, they're about 265 yards per game through the air and 177 yards per game on the ground. It slowed down a little bit towards the end. Smith's a great back, about 1,150 yards on the season, 6 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns, in addition to 3 receiving touchdowns, so 17 touchdowns from scrimmage. He's a really good, viable asset out of the backfield. He's got to have a good day here, right? He's got to be strong. They got to be able to run the ball effectively against this Clemson defensive line that is a really physically strong unit in the trenches. Can they find a way to win that battle? I think it's certainly possible. I'd like to think they can do that, but this is going to be a tough matchup. Certainly keep an eye on, can this SMU team run the ball? If they can, they'll run away with a win. If they can't, they'll certainly be in a dogfight and face some issues.
Now we look at an offensive line. It's been incredibly stout this year. They do have some weaknesses, though. Left tackle Savion Byrd, he's just really not all that good, especially in pass protection. It might be a concern there. Logan Parr is a veteran at left guard, happy with his play. Ja'Kai Clark at center has been great in pass protection. Justin Osborne also having a phenomenal year. I mean, this is a very stout interior, a lot of veteran experience there. And P.J. Williams at right tackle is an impressive player as well. But this is a weakness here in Savion Byrd, Nick. We have not seen them face many pass rushing prowess teams. Clemson has a lot of heat off the edge. I think maybe Pitt and Louisville would be the only comparable opponents, and they handle those well. Pittsburgh mainly just due to scheming, maybe not in terms of talent. But this is an interesting matchup, Nick, and I keep referring to it because we just have not really seen this opportunity much for them to prove their worth. How much of that valuation will be determined on Saturday, if it's a successful effort or not.
Bird's been a disappointing player. The transfer from Oklahoma, who we thought could really elevate this offensive line, has struggled at left tackle. Logan Parr has been okay at left guard, a veteran graduate senior who also transferred over previously. He's got to be strong here. They got to be good on the left side. That left side can certainly be dangerous. This is a pass rush from Clemson that has a lot of talented different pieces. Can they win that battle? I think it's possible, but this is certainly an opportunity for Clemson to dominate in the trenches and put a lot of pressure on the quarterback and really rough up Kevin Jennings, make him uncomfortable. This is certainly a dangerous spot if you're an SMU fan.
Now I move to a Clemson defense, unit that probably isn't as strong as we've seen in years past, only 21.6 points per game being allowed, but one that you certainly don't want to face, and that's been really good over the last month. Since the Louisville game, they really cracked down on opponents. They've given up 20 or less in 4 straight games, held South Carolina to only 17. This pass rush was winning a lot. This defensive line was on fire, led by TJ Parker and Peter Woods off the edge. Stephon Green is a nice young defensive tackle for them. DeMonte Capehart, they got him back, and he was having a good game. Cade Denhoff, not as much. Peyton Page, a nice defensive tackle. Thing is, Nick, is they were winning every single rep against South Carolina. They could not tackle. They could not get Lenora Sellers to the ground, and it was just an abysmal performance in terms of tackling. They had 24 missed tackles, Nick, and I know Kevin Jennings isn't going to be as athletic as Sellers. I mean, this is despicable, though, and this is going to be incredibly upsetting because they should have won this game. There's so many times I had him on the ground. They just couldn't complete the play. I don't know what it was, getting too overexcited, bad fundamentals, but that has to fix this week, or Jennings will probably do the same thing to you, even though that will not be the game plan. I envision a much better performance in terms of tackling from the Tigers.
One of the reasons why I think SMU could win this game is because the tackling woes that this team had against South Carolina, this team has in Clemson, were just unable to make tackles they needed to, and it certainly really bit them in the end. TJ Parker is still a great player, 46 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 10 sacks for him, plus a pass breakup. He's a good do-it-all player, 5 forced fumbles on the year. Peter Woods, a really highly rated player out of high school, is having a solid season, 22 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him, having a decent season. Peyton Page has been good at times as well, 22 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss for him, plus a pick. Jermaine Lewis has been solid, 21 total tackles, 4 sacks, tackles for loss for him, plus a sack. Stephon Green, DeMonte Capehart have also been okay, 15 tackles each. Trey Williams and Cade Denhoff have 12 tackles each in rotational reps. This unit has to be strong here. I need a big day out of TJ Parker. If you're a Clemson fan, he's got to be really dominant. Got to make sure you put pressure. Peter Woods has to have a good day as well. Move him around and make sure he gets good pressure on the quarterback. They got to wrap up and complete their tackles. That is a big issue. They have to make sure they're strong. The 2 sophomores, though, have to have a good day.
Trey Williams on the interior, pretty good player as well. They were happy to get Wade Woodaz back, even though he was a big problem with tackling as well. He's a good run defender, great leader, versatility and coverage. Barrett Carter, it was a bit of a struggle-filled game for him as well, but he's a great senior veteran for them, good against the run. Maybe not as good in coverage, but he's going to be the tone setter. And then Sammy Brown's having a heck of a year. He's now at the 10.5 TFL, the former 5-star, true freshman recruit who's gotten a lot of go over the last month, Nick, and he certainly has delivered, paying big dividends, getting him on the field. This is a guy that didn't have problems tackling. He missed no tackles, actually, against South Carolina. One of the only guys that was disciplined was the true freshman, Nick. So this linebacking group, it's incredible when they're playing at a high clip, but, Woodaz and Carter, the veterans, looked a little shaky at times against South Carolina. If we're going to see a bounce-back performance from this team, it's going to start with those guys.
Yeah, Sammy Brown, the true freshman, is a phenomenal player who's having a really good season. He was a high-level recruit out of high school, and he's living up to the billing so far. 56 total tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks for him, 2 pass breakups. Really good numbers out of him. And then Bear, Carter, and Wade Woodaz lead the team in tackles, each of them. Carter 68, Woodaz 67, 10 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks for Carter. Woodaz 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him, 6 pass breakups for Carter as well. He's been a really good captain, good leader for this team. He needs to have a good day here. These linebackers have been really good for this team. They've been a reliable part of this defense, probably the best part of this defense all year. But they got to play another good game here. They got to be strong, got to make sure they complete their tackles, wrap up your tackles, play good in coverage as well. Don't get beat over the middle, and have a really strong, solid day.
Now we look at the Clemson secondary. For the most part this year, they've been really good. They haven't really had many flaws against South Carolina. They were really good. Gave up a couple of passes to the boundary and a few in the middle. A couple screens to get some yards. But for the most part, they held them in check. They weren't really threatened downfield too much. And I think SMU looked to take a page out of Pittsburgh's playbook. They had 350 yards passing. Desmond Reed he's a great route runner. Rashard Smith as well. So I think the running back position will be optimal in trying to attack them with a downfield passing attack. And they got plenty of burners as well, guys that can win downfield. So they're going to look to test these corners. Avion Terrell, Jaden Lucas. Terrell's having a great year. Lucas as well. I think he's a pretty solid run defender, but really struggles in that area at times. Ashton Hampton will get on the field as a good coverage corner. They can cover quite well, Nick. I don't think that's certainly a problem in man. Maybe in zone they can be attacked a little bit more. Khalil Barnes in the slot. He's been picked on a good bit this year. He's really struggled for the most part. He's still a young player, though. And at free safety of R.J. Mickens, a veteran, and another young guy, and Kylan Griffin, who's also been a little bit inconsistent. Mickens, though, he's been phenomenal for them in coverage. He's a really good run defender as well. What do you think will happen in this passing attack for SMU? Because against Pittsburgh, it wasn't great. They were playing from behind a little bit, so that led to 50-plus passing attempts. But there's similarities to those passing attacks. And again, it starts with Rashard Smith, where they can certainly burn them for big plays.
This is a secondary that's a good unit, has some solid pieces. R.J. Mickens, 59 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 6 pass breakups for him, plus a pick. Khalil Barnes has been solid, 52 total tackles, 3 picks, 3 pass breakups. Avion Taylor has been good for this team, 43 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 9 pass breakups for him. I like what he can do. He also has 2 interceptions, so he's a good player overall for this team. Jaden Lucas has to be a little bit better in coverage, has a solid season though, 32 total tackles, 6 pass breakups. Colin Griffin, 25 total tackles, 2 pass breakups. Ashton Hampton has 2 interceptions, including one he took for a touchdown, 3 pass breakups, and 22 total tackles for him. The secondary is going to be tested here, right? This offense is pretty solid through the air. For SMU, can they win that battle? I think it's certainly possible. They got to play smart, solid football here.
Now look at the Mustangs defense, a unit that I've praised over the last couple of years consecutively for their improvements, and now they're playing at an all-time best level, giving up 19.8 points per game, only 326 yards per contest. Starts with a deep run defense that is very stout, giving up 100 yards per game. They've not really been tested in too many games. Boston College is maybe a tougher opponent. Gave up 180 rushing in that one. Other than that, no one's really had too much success against them. It's because they have a very deep defensive line. Jared Harrison-Hunte, another Miami transfer. Jafari Harvey, also a former Hurricane, lead the way. Those two guys are phenomenal. Elijah Roberts, he's going to be your best player here off the edge. Great run defender, nice pass rusher. Cameron Robertson, Isaiah Smith, Anthony Booker, Corey Robertson, and then Mike Lockhart's very good as well. I mean, these guys are about 8-9 deep up front, Nick. This is not a joke of a unit. I think these guys can really compete with most of college football. We haven't really seen them against, too powerful of an offense. I'm not saying Clemson has that one either, but I would say this is probably going to be their toughest challenge of the year. How do you think they'll perform?
This is certainly a tough challenge for what is a good unit that has some solid pieces. I do like what they have here. I think Harrison-Hunter is a really solid piece. 35 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 5 sacks for him, plus a pick. Isaiah Smith's been really good coming off the edge there. A solid player that they move around a little bit. 29 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. Cam Robertson, 29 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks for him. Elijah Roberts, 27 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. While Jafari Harvey has been really good for this team. 26 total tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. Corey Robinson, Mike Lockhart each have 22 total tackles, plus a few tackles for loss for each of them. I like Lockhart as a good rotational depth piece. This is a big physical defensive line. They're going to have to be strong in the trenches. They're going to have to win this battle here against this Clemson offensive line that's been playing good football as of late. Can they win that battle? I think it's certainly possible, but it may be a tough test.
37 sacks for the Mustangs. They're going to want to look to attack on the interior. You look in the middle of their defense, two great linebackers, Ahmad Walker and Kobe Wilson. Seniors that were starters last year. These guys have played a lot of football, have played very well in this conference. They've both been very stout against the run, pretty solid in coverage as well. Of course, this is a different matchup than we're accustomed to seeing for them, but they've played plenty of good football. I don't think they're going to put in a poor performance by any means, and you have a very efficient tackler in Alexander Kilgore. What do you make of this linebacking group, Nick? 'Cause I certainly think they're going to be great in leading the way against slowing down Phil Maffa in this ground game, but maybe it's possible that they struggle in this big-time opportunity. Don't think they will, though.
I think they certainly have an opportunity to be good here. I do like these three linebackers. Certainly they're solid pieces. Kobe Wilson leads the way for his team with 95 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 2 picks, including one he took for a touchdown. Ahmed Walker, 78 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss for him, plus a pick, 3 pass breakups. And then Alex Kilgore, I think he's a very underrated player, 50 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups. I think they'll have a good day here. I don't think they'll get beaten. This is a very strong unit in the middle there. I think they have a lot of good pieces with Kilgore rotating in and out. I like this linebacking core, and I think they're going to have a good day here.
Now we'll move to an SMU secondary. I think there might be some concerns here. Only give up 56% opponent completion rating. They've given up 20 touchdowns, though. They have snagged 15 interceptions. Again, not facing the toughest of the attacks, but they got tore up against Duke. Pitt was playing from behind. I guess they were able to put up some numbers because of that. TCU was also playing from behind. So numbers are certainly a bit skewed, and they're not getting beat early on in games by any means. But if this pass rush is held in check and the secondary has to cover one-on-one for the duration of the game, what will happen? Brandon Crossley, solid corner. Deuce Harmon's a little bit better. Jalen Davis-Robertson, he's not really all that great. I'm just not convinced these corners can really cover all that well. Cale Sanders, a veteran in the slot, and he's much better. More of a run defender than he is a coverage asset, but he's still good in that regard. Ahmad Moses, he's a versatile player for them at safety. Isaiah Nwakbia, he's also a player that's going to be the best one here at free safety for them, along with Jonathan McGill. So they have some great coverage safeties. Maybe out wide at corner, though, they can be more vulnerable. This is by far the most talented receiving core they've seen all year, Nick. How will these guys do? Because they're going to have to play big.
They have to play big. I think they're having a good day, and they're up for the task, but this is certainly a tough task. Nwakpa is a really good player, 91 total tackles as a safety. He's really good against the run, 3 tackles for loss, 3 picks, 3 pass breakups. Good numbers there. Ahmed Moses is really solid for this team as well at safety, 61 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 picks for him, plus one of them he took for a touchdown, 3 pass breakups. Jonathan McGill's been solid for this team as well, 47 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 7 pass breakups. Cale Sanders, 43 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and a pass breakup for him. Brandon Crossley, 27 total tackles, 6 pass breakups. Deuce Harmon, 25 total tackles, 6 pass breakups as well. Good numbers for both of them there. Jalen Davis-Robinson's been really good for this team, 21 total tackles, 4 pass breakups. Devontae Clastain has been okay in rotational reps at safety. This is a tough test. They got to be strong here. Klubnik's going to attack you over and over again. Can they win that battle? I think it's certainly possible, but it's one to keep an eye on.
Now we move to tail of the tape, team comparisons. I think it's pretty easy here, Nick. I think Clemson has the edge everywhere else. I think even might be considered for the D-line. Elijah Roberts is a great player. I don't think it really compares to the edge duo that the Tigers have. I think quarterback's going to be even as well, while running back will get the nod in favor of Brashard Smith. Everywhere else, though, it's a pretty solid edge for Clemson. Not overwhelming by any means. And again, I think D-line could be closely contested, but I think Tigers top to bottom, they're still going to get the benefit of the doubt.
I think the Tigers do get the benefit of the doubt. I think this makes a lot of sense for me. This is a good Tigers team. It's got a lot of talented pieces. Maybe defensive line, you can flip that, but those are 2 really good sophomores on either side of the defensive line for Clemson. So I do like this tail of the tape comparison.
The final thoughts in the prediction, keys to the game. SMU secondary will need to make lots of plays. Don't prove to be a fluke in the trenches. And I think Clemson just execute better in the red zone, overwhelm these offensive tackles. I have a bet on Clemson to win the conference title they placed in the preseason, so I got to go with them. And I definitely think there's matchups here that would make that a reality. I'm not just, talking out of my back, Nick. I certainly think that this defensive line can win these matchups. Felt that way last week in South Carolina, and they dominated them up front. And their offensive line looked much better against an elite D-line. I know that there's a lot of depth from SMU, but I think in terms of NFL draft talent, it's not as good as the Gamecocks. So I think they can play a good game in the trenches, and I think Klubnik and these receivers, if they can stay hot like they were last week, they can legitimately win this game. You're going to SMU in blowout fashion, and I can understand why. Clemson's a bit of a laughingstock at times, and SMU is a good team with their balancing on their defense. But again, they just have not been put in too many opportunities like this. I don't think the moment will be too big for them because I think Rhett Lashley will have that composed. But it's not going to be as easy as this one, Nick. They've faced zero adversity this year at all. Maybe other than the Duke game where they were able to block a field goal late. But that's it, Nick. When they get down in this game, they're playing a team that's much more physical. What's going to happen? I think that's the biggest question mark. I'm going to take Clemson, not just because I have a bet for those reasons. I think those also going to be applied.
I like SMU a lot here. This is a very interesting matchup. First year in the ACC for SMU that won their conference, the AAC last year. They make their first year appearance in the conference title game. Clemson, they're a fixture in this, right? This is their 10th appearance. They're 8-1 in their previous 9 appearances. Obviously, a lot of those were won during their height of their dynasty with Dabo Swinney. They won 3 in a row in 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Actually, 4 in a row. They won a bunch in a row. 5 in a row. Sorry, I misread the stat. 5 in a row at one point. They were absolutely dominating for a long period of time. This is a really good team that Dabo Swinney has, even if they do make a lot of mistakes. I've been disappointed with how they looked against Louisville and South Carolina, losing 2 home games that they really shouldn't have lost. This SMU team, I'm going with the hot team here. They've been just playing great football right now. Since that Duke game where they got away with murder and really looked shaky at the end of October, they blew out Pitt, they blew out BC. Or they had a 10-point win over BC, and then they absolutely beat the brakes off UVA and Cal, including a 38-6 win over Cal this past weekend. I like SMU. This is the hot team here. They would love to get that bye. That put themselves in a really good position. Rhett Lashley's team is really talented. I like what this team can do. I think they have a really good offense, and the defense will play a good game here. In Charlotte, sure, the Clemson fans will probably show up and have a good fan presence there. And like I said, this team has won 8 conference titles, including 6 in a row at one point. Really good numbers. But I'm going to take the hot team here. I like SMU to really run away with this one and cement themselves as one of the best 4 teams in the country to get that bye and really position themselves in a good spot in the college football playoff.
And another thing I'll ask you, Nick, if they miss 6 less tackles and they convert on one of those, 3 trips and plus territory, they didn't convert on any of them. I mean, they would have potentially blown out South Carolina, so I think this team's being overlooked a little bit. Don't you think if those mistakes were cut down just a tad, that it would have been a much different outlook, and your view on this game would be different?
I think my view would be a little bit different, but I'd still probably pick SMU, probably by a closer score. I just think SMU is the hot team right now. I think Clemson really hasn't shown me enough this season. I didn't think they had a great game against Virginia Tech or Pitt in 2 games they won. And if they had beaten South Carolina, sure, I would have been pretty impressed, and they would still keep themselves in a good spot for the college football playoff, regardless of the result here against SMU. I just don't trust this team right now. They've looked shaky at times. I think SMU is just playing a little bit better football, and they're a little more polished on offense, and will get the job done ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make, the trust. It's always something. We get into the red zone and it's something silly we get picked off on, or we miss 6 tackles on one play and can't sack the guy. So I totally understand that. That'll be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. It's going to be a fun weekend.
Looking forward to this one at 8 o'clock on Saturday night. I think it's a great matchup going on in Charlotte. The ACC title game has had some good games in the past couple of years or so. There's always some good matchups in Charlotte, some good battles from some of these teams. I think this will be another good one here.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.